Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that someone broke into your house, but nothing is missing. Your TV is still there. Your phone is untouched. Your wallet is exactly where you left it, yet somehow you are poor, not because you spent money, not because the bank charged you a fee, not because the stock market crashed, but because an invisible force quietly reached into your savings account and stole a piece of your future. This thief doesn't wear a mask, it doesn't trigger alarms, and most people don't even realize it's happening until years later, when they wonder why their hard-earned savings no longer buy the life they planned. That thief has a name: inflation. Here's the mystery. If inflation is just prices going up, why does it feel like everyone is working harder but getting poorer? Why do salaries rise, yet lifestyles shrink? Why do retirees who saved for decades suddenly struggle to afford basics? And most importantly, who benefits when your money loses value? Today, we are uncovering the hidden story behind inflation, how it begins, how it grows, how it quietly drains your savings, and why history keeps repeating this cycle again and again. Stay with me, because the most dangerous part of inflation isn't what you see at the grocery store. It's what's happening behind closed doors. To understand inflation, we need to understand something even more basic: what money really is. Most people think money has value because it is printed on paper or displayed on a banking app. But money itself has no real power. Its value comes from trust. Trust that you can exchange it for food. Trust that it will hold purchasing power over time. Trust that tomorrow it will still mean something. For most of human history, money wasn't paper. It was gold, silver, grain, shells, physical things with limited supply. You couldn't create gold by pressing a button. You had to mine it, refine it, transport it. That natural scarcity protected people's savings. But in the modern world, money is no longer tied to physical limits. Governments and central banks control the supply. And this is where the story takes its first dangerous turn. In the early 20th century, nations realized something powerful. If they could create money, they could fund wars, stimulate economies, and avoid unpopular taxes. Instead of telling citizens, "We need to raise taxes," leaders discovered a quieter option: print money. No protests, no riots, no immediate backlash. Just more currency entering the system. At first, it feels harmless, but over time, this decision sets off a chain reaction that slowly eats away at every saver's wealth. Inflation doesn't start with price tags. It starts with money creation. Let's break it down simply. Imagine a small economy with $1 million circulating and 1 million products for sale. On average, each product costs $1. Balanced, stable, predictable. Now imagine the government prints another $1 million, but the number of products stays the same. Suddenly, there is twice as much money chasing the same amount of goods. What happens next is inevitable. Prices rise. Not because companies are greedy, not because people suddenly changed, but because money itself became less scarce. This is inflation's true root: currency dilution. Just like adding water to juice makes the flavor weaker, adding money to the economy weakens every existing unit. Your savings don't disappear, they're diluted. And here's where the silent theft begins. When new money enters the system, it doesn't reach everyone equally. Banks, governments, corporations, and financial institutions get access first. They spend this money before prices adjust. By the time regular workers and savers feel the effects, prices have already risen. This is called the Cantillon effect, a powerful economic principle that explains why inflation always benefits those closest to money creation and hurts those farthest away. In simple terms, the rich get richer first, everyone else pays later. Inflation rarely explodes overnight. That's what makes it so dangerous. It creeps forward slowly, year after year, disguised as normal economic growth. A little inflation is even advertised as healthy. Central banks around the world openly target around 2% inflation annually. That means they intentionally designed the system so your money loses purchasing power every single year. Let that sink in. If inflation is 2% annually, your money loses roughly half its value in about 35 years. That means someone who saved $100,000 for retirement may only have the purchasing power of $50,000 later in life without spending a single dollar. Now imagine inflation at 5% or 8% or higher. This is when the damage accelerates. At first, people adjust. They accept higher grocery bills. They tolerate rising rent. They expect salary raises to catch up, but wages rarely keep pace with real inflation. Employers adjust slowly. Governments manipulate statistics. And official inflation numbers often exclude the items people spend the most money on: housing, education, healthcare, and energy. Meanwhile, savings accounts pay tiny interest rates that don't even match inflation. So while your bank balance stays the same, its real value is shrinking every day. This is the perfect illusion. You feel stable. Your money still shows the same digits, but your future purchasing power is quietly collapsing. One of inflation's greatest weapons is human psychology. People notice sudden losses, like stock market crashes or theft. But inflation is slow, gradual, subtle. It doesn't trigger panic. It triggers adaptation. Instead of asking, "Why is everything more expensive?" people simply change behavior. They buy smaller portions. They downgrade lifestyles. They delay retirement. They work longer hours. Inflation trains people to accept less while believing nothing is wrong. And this is exactly why governments prefer inflation over taxes. Taxes create anger. Inflation creates confusion. By the time people realize what's happening, the damage is already locked in. As inflation becomes normal, another dangerous cycle begins: debt expansion. Governments borrow more because inflation makes old debt cheaper to repay. If you borrowed money years ago, paying it back with weaker currency benefits the borrower. So governments run larger deficits. Central banks print more money to buy government bonds. Banks create more loans. Consumers take on more debt because low interest rates make borrowing look affordable. The entire system becomes addicted to cheap money, and this is where the story approaches its breaking point. Because inflation doesn't just steal savings, it distorts the entire economy. It inflates asset bubbles. It widens wealth inequality. It rewards speculation over productivity. It punishes responsibility and saving. And eventually, it forces a moment of reckoning. A moment when prices rise too fast, when currencies lose credibility, when central banks lose control. That moment has happened many times throughout history. Every inflation story follows the same dangerous pattern. It starts quietly. It grows slowly. And then, almost suddenly, it explodes into public awareness. This is the moment when people stop saying prices are rising and start saying something is wrong. Historically, this breaking point arrives when three forces collide. 1. Too much money in circulation. 2. Too much debt in the system. 3. Too little trust in the currency. When confidence breaks, inflation accelerates faster than policymakers expect. Businesses raise prices preemptively. Workers demand higher wages. Suppliers shorten contracts. Consumers rush to spend before money loses more value. This creates a feedback loop. Higher prices lead to panic buying. Panic buying creates shortages. Shortages push prices even higher. Suddenly, inflation is no longer silent. It becomes visible, emotional, and chaotic. At this stage, central banks face an impossible choice: raise interest rates sharply and crash the economy, or keep printing money and let inflation run wild. Either path causes pain, and most governments try to delay the pain, which only makes the final outcome worse. When inflation accelerates, the first victims are always savers. Cash becomes toxic. Fixed income retirees suffer. Middle-class families lose purchasing power fastest. Imagine saving for 20 or 30 years, only to discover that your retirement fund now buys half of what you expected. This isn't hypothetical. It has happened repeatedly across history in Latin America, Europe, Africa, and even developed economies. Inflation punishes patience. It punishes discipline. It punishes anyone who trusted the system to preserve value. Meanwhile, those with assets, real estate, stocks, commodities, often see their nominal wealth rise. This creates the illusion that everyone is getting richer, while in reality, the gap between asset owners and wage earners widens dramatically. This is how inflation quietly transfers wealth from savers to borrowers, from workers to asset holders, from the public to institutions closest to money creation. It's not accidental. It's structural. When inflation becomes politically dangerous, Governments rush to fix it, but many solutions create new problems. Let's examine the most common responses. Price controls. Governments cap prices on food, fuel, or rent. Sounds helpful, but it discourages production. Suppliers stop selling at a loss. Shelves go empty. Black markets emerge. Shortages spread. Stimulus payments to help struggling citizens. Governments inject more money into the economy. This temporarily relieves pain, but increases inflation further. It's like treating a fire with gasoline. Interest rate hikes. Central banks raise rates to slow spending and borrowing. This can reduce inflation, but it also increases unemployment, bankruptcies, and housing crashes. Debt-heavy economies suffer the most. Currency pegs and controls. Some governments restrict foreign exchange or fix their currency value. This creates parallel markets, corruption, and capital flight. Trust collapses even faster. The truth is uncomfortable. Once inflation accelerates beyond a certain point, there are no painless solutions. Every option comes with severe consequences. This is why prevention matters more than reaction, but prevention requires discipline, something political systems rarely maintain. Now let's connect this story to the present. Over the past few years, global money supply expanded at historic speed. Governments injected trillions into economies to stabilize markets, prevent recessions, and fund stimulus programs. At first, asset markets surged, stock prices rose, real estate exploded, crypto markets boomed. Then came the next phase, consumer inflation. Food prices increased, energy costs spiked, rent surged, transportation became more expensive, everyday life started costing more, even for people with stable incomes. What made this cycle especially dangerous was public perception. Many were told inflation was temporary, that it would fade quickly, that supply chains were the only issue. But history shows that once inflation expectations shift, reversing them is extremely difficult. When people believe prices will keep rising, they behave differently. They spend faster. They save less. They demand higher wages. They invest more aggressively. These behaviors reinforce inflation, turning temporary price spikes into long-term trends. Inflation is not a rare accident. It is a recurring feature of fiat money systems. The cycle usually looks like this. 1. Economic slowdown or crisis. 2. Government spending increases. 3. Central banks print money. 4. Asset prices rise. 5. Consumer prices follow. 6. Public anger grows. 7. Emergency policies fail. 8. Trust erodes. 9. System resets. Then the cycle begins again. Each generation experiences it differently. Some face mild inflation, others live through currency collapses. But the underlying mechanism remains the same: too much money chasing limited real value. And the most tragic part, every generation is told this time is different. It almost never is. Inflation doesn't just steal money, it steals time. It steals options. It steals freedom. It forces people to delay retirement, work multiple jobs, accept lower quality of life, depend more on debt, abandon long-term planning. It turns life into a constant race against rising prices. And worst of all, it normalizes financial insecurity. People stop expecting stability. They adapt to permanent uncertainty. That psychological shift is one of inflation's most damaging effects, because once people accept instability as normal, systems stop improving. Let's distill this entire story into 3 powerful lessons. Holding money without protection exposes you to guaranteed loss of purchasing power. Inflation makes doing nothing the riskiest strategy. It comes from deliberate decisions about money supply, debt, and spending. Understanding this gives you power instead of confusion. Those who recognize inflation early adjust their behavior. They invest differently, they protect assets, they think long-term. Late reactions are always more painful. Here's the uncomfortable question no one likes to ask: if inflation is silently stealing your savings, and this cycle keeps repeating, what happens next? Will the system stabilize? Will currencies reset? Will new forms of money emerge? Or will future generations face even greater instability? The answer isn't simple, but one thing is certain: ignoring inflation doesn't make it disappear. It only makes its impact stronger. The real danger isn't inflation itself, it's financial ignorance. Because when people don't understand money, they become easy victims of the system built around it. If this video changed the way you see money, make sure to like it. It helps more people discover financial education that schools never taught. Subscribe if you want deep, story-driven breakdowns of how money, power, and economic systems really work. And comment below. Do you think inflation will get worse, or are we approaching another financial reset? Because the future of your savings may depend on the answer, and on how prepared you are when the next cycle begins.